Hello everybody and welcome to a very special edition of Tournament Tactician. My name is Boulevard and it is week 52, and for those of you that understand how the Gregorian calendar works, that means we have made a full cycle around the Earth's sun since I started doing these. Now, a 1-year anniversary thing is really cool, but you might be looking back at last week's video and saying, Boulevard, that was week 50. How is this week 52? Well, you see, back in August I did week 16 and a half between week 16 and 17, and that did come out on a Friday. It was just a short video and there wasn't a lot of information to be gathered, so it didn't feel right to count it as a full week. If you want, I can go back and adjust all of the titles, but we are calling this officially week 52. And so it's been actually a little bit over a year since I started doing these, because I did take a small break for Christmas and New Year's, not really for my own sake, but because there weren't any tournaments happening. Everybody else took a break and I was forced to, so that's what happened there. So thank you everybody so much for supporting me over the course of the last year. It has been great, and I am not going to stop doing these anytime soon. Not until I'm a full-time caster for Riot and they say, hey, you can't have a YouTube channel anymore. That's pretty much the only thing that's going to tear me away from this. So in true Boulevard fashion, we're going to keep casting until the light goes off, and that means we're going to be casting the Majin Bay and Jason Florent Mastering Runeterra tournament this weekend that I am going to be prepping you guys for in this video. $1,000 prize pool, $2 entry, more or less. You have to sign up for the Patreon. It's $2 minimum. So, going to get you prepared for that and go over the tier list in normal fashion. So, the main difference is that a lot of things have moved from Tier 2 to Tier 3, which is good because that's a sign that we're getting closer and closer to what the meta actually looks like. More decks are becoming less viable, if that makes sense, and it's a good thing in terms of recognizing what a meta actually looks like. Now, I think this might actually be the most amount of decks I've ever had in Tier 1, and that's really good and really bad. Really good because, yay, meta diversity, really bad because it makes it harder to predict, makes it harder to know what the correct answer on things to bring is. But what I can say with a degree of certainty is that Nasus and Door and Aesol Demacia are probably going to be the two most popular decks. Aesol Demacia has picked up a lot of traction over the course of the week on ladder, as well as a couple of other decks we're going to get into now. So Tier 1 should speak for itself. I don't think I'm really going to be contested on any of these. Maybe Frostbite midrange, maybe Lee Sin. Aurelia Azir didn't do anything last weekend, but neither did TLC, and I'm definitely not going to sit here and tell you that TLC is not a Tier 1 deck. I think that that deck is very powerful. But the Aurelia Azir, we talked about it on War Room. There's a couple of different reasons that there could have been no people running this and, getting to a top 8 of a tournament. Part of it was that we only looked at the one tournament, the Online League Series, because it was the only one with more than 64 players. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a lot of tournaments happening very quickly. This week is the $1,000 tournament for Mastering Runeterra. Next weekend, I know that Squeeby and some other streamer who I cannot remember, I'm so sorry, are holding a $300 open, I believe, and there's also going to be the Runeterra Dex $1,000 open. Weekend after that, it's probably going to be a DOR or an OLS or something. It's the last weekend that we actually have Cross Shard enabled, so after that, things are going to get a little bit weird, but hey, for at least the month of May, got a lot of stuff coming at you in terms of tournament action. So we're going to be able to see all this stuff play out in real time. Now, Nasus and Door, obviously this deck's still Tier 1, not a question. Watcher, not a question. Lee Sin, I said, as long as Lee Sin exists in its current state, it's going to be a Tier 1 deck. That is what it is. I'm going to stand by that one. Draven Ezreal, again, popping up a lot. Does very well into Aesol Demacia. Other Demacia decks in general, this has always done pretty well against. And, of course, Frostbite midrange still feeling like it's a good anti-Demacia deck that Draven Ezreal just happens to do very well against as well. So I think Draven Ezreal is still in a really good spot. Tier 1 is not where I want to see this deck, but it is just kind of indicative of the fact that we're in a very mid-range style meta. So that's going to stay there for a while. Frostbite midrange kind of the same. Of course, it gets countered by Draven Ezreal. Frostbite midrange probably isn't going to be very popular, but I think that the people that do like the deck, that do one-trick it, are still going to do very well with it. Aurelia Azir, you're on thin ice, Aurelia Azir. This is your last chance to do something. If you don't do anything this weekend, you're not even going down to Tier 3. You're getting booted off the tier list, Aurelia Azir. So you gotta pick up the pace. Now, it's been performing pretty well across fight nights, but as far as actual open tournaments, of course, it hasn't really done much, but I would expect a high presence of it at the Mastering Runeterra tournament this weekend. As for top cut, maybe not a super high presence. If there are a top 16 cutoff, I would say 3 Aurelia Azir. It sounds about right to me. I don't expect this deck to do phenomenally. I think people are still kind of figuring out what kind of lineup you want to fit it into. Are you looking to target TLC, something like that? And I think that of the big 3, Aesol, Demacia, TLC, and Nasus, TLC is almost certainly going to be the least popular. Players have really started to move away from that deck for a variety of reasons. 1, it's probably the most boring. 2, it has some of the hardest counters in terms of, if you want to pick on that lineup, you're probably looking to pick on the TLC. Nasus and Door really hasn't felt like something that you can pick on reliably. And Aesol Demacia, maybe you can find a lineup that picks on it, but if you run into somebody not playing Aesol Demacia, you're probably in a lot of trouble there. Whereas an anti-TLC lineup probably still has game against most things because you are going to probably include Overwhelm and Aurelia Azir and one other kind of deck. You know what I mean? So it looks like TLC is still the target point for a lot of counter lineups, and the other decks just feel a lot safer. So not expecting a whole lot of TLC in the tournament. I am still expecting some pretty nice top cut numbers. If we have a top 16, I'd say I want to see at least 6 TLC. That makes sense to me. Nasus Indoor is still on a rampage. It'll probably take more than half of the top 8 this weekend, so Nasus Indoor definitely a thing to look out for. Probably the thing to ban. Just it feels too solid into everything. Maybe if you're playing Aesol Demacia, you want to leave it open. It has a pretty good Nasus Indoor matchup. That's part of the reason that the deck is so popular. But we're going to hop down into the more interesting stuff into Tier 2, because Tier 1 really hasn't changed much from the last format, so you kind of understand what you're getting when you look at it. And it's good and bad, that Tier 1 is basically the same as it was last format. It means that you don't really have to learn new things, but it's also kind of boring. A new set dropped and it feels like nothing really changed. Now, as far as what changed in Tier 2, some of the cool new stuff that's been popping up, of course, the Ruben pile has been performing very admirably. This deck I'm not super hopeful for this weekend just because it does struggle against Aesol Demacia, and I don't think it does very well against Watcher Control either, so we're going to have to see how that one, sort of lands. And a deck that is sort of like the Ruben pile, but actually has a pretty good Aesol Demacia matchup. Still testing this one a little bit. It seems pretty close to 50-50 with the Matron Cytherea being a little favored just because you do get to out late game them, but of course, the sharp sights and the single combats and all that stuff out of Aesol Demacia can still be a pain. But Matron Cytherea, this is a deck I want to talk about. Now, you've probably seen this somewhere. If you've been playing ladder, anything like that, there have been a couple different versions floating around. I'm using this one from Adeltrocity because I trust him. He's a good player. He keeps topping seasonals. Very good. But this is essentially what you're looking at. Now, I've seen other champions. I've seen no champions. Shyvana is the one that I like the most. This list doesn't feel perfect. It definitely feels like there's some refining to do here. I would like a little bit more draw power, and maybe, like I said, I copied this list card for card, played it for a day, kind of figured out what I liked and didn't like. I definitely think I want a little bit more draw power. I'm not sold on the Dragon Chow. I'm not necessarily sold on the Oblivious Islander. I've seen Mobilize in the deck, which I think is pretty cool, but Mobilize is something that I'm not usually one to get behind early. When Dragons were playing Mobilize previously, I wasn't really big on that, so I'm a little skeptical of Mobilize as it stands. But as you can see, there's 28 followers in the deck, 31 units in total, so if there's a deck to play Mobilize in, yeah, this is probably it. It's just 5 single combats, some draw power, and a judgment, and boom, slap it all in there. You've got yourself a deck, and of course, the main combo that you're looking for is Matron into Cytherea. Go ahead and double up everything on your board, but there are a lot of really cool other combos within the deck, mostly Mask Mother and interactions with Darkwater Scourge, or anything that you give Ephemeral 2 with Oblivious Islander, or even just Stalking Shadows. So this is a deck that I'm a really big fan of. I'm really curious to see how it's going to perform this weekend, but I've been enjoying it a lot, and I think that it is really solid. I think that there's something there. I don't know if it's Tier 1 there. And the Shyvana does make things a little bit awkward. For the most part, players have moved unilaterally to Shyvana Aesol for the Demacia Aesol instead of Zoe just taking it out of the deck entirely, saying, hey, this isn't doing what we needed to do. The Shyvana offers so much more utility. So, this deck is very much runnable. The Matron Cytherea without the Shyvana, so you can run both of these in the lineup without too much trouble. You could also just play your Zoe in the Aesol Demacia if that is still a route that you want to go. But I'm really, this is my deck to watch for the weekend. Absolutely 1000% is Matron Cytherea. I think that this deck is doing really cool things. I think it's got really good matchups into a lot of the more prominent decks that we're looking at. I'm not totally sure how it does into something like Watcher Control, but I'm looking at the list and I'm not seeing a lot of things that, Avalanche and Withering Wail are particularly useful against. And I think that's one of the reasons that TLC is falling off so hard, is we're seeing a lot of matchups that are popping up that your removal is inefficient against. We're not in a sweeper format. We're not in a go wide format. We're in a very hearty, mid-rangey style format, and that is where control usually starts to fall off. But I think that the combo potential of TLC is still so high, it's going to perform very admirably. Maybe we have to swap to a little bit more of a ramp-focused build. That does seem to do better in a mid-range style of format, but of course with Aurelia Azir still running around, things are always questionable in that regard. But, gonna move on, and then Tier 3 is just kind of filled with all the rabble. All the leftovers. But the point that I really want to drive home here is that we have moved away from this go wide strategy. Nasus Indoor is really the only deck that's still playing that in the traditional way. Of course, Aurelia Azir goes wide as well, but they tend to do it in combat, not at slow speed, where things like Avalanche are going to get you full value. That's why TLC is not doing so hot. But of course, Thresh Nasus is still going to be popular. Aesol Demacia, definitely going to be super popular. If I had to guess your top 3 decks, Nasus Indoor, Aesol Demacia, TLC is a safe bet for third place, but honestly, I'm not sure. That's definitely the one that I could see getting upset, but I think that Nasus is still like an auto-include in just about every lineup. Ace Demacia, super solid in just about everything. We're getting into a point where we're just seeing a lot of 50-50 matchups across the board, and that's where the customization gets to come in. You know, who can break open this meta? It's not me. I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to give you the facts and the data that I've collected and let you guys do all the legwork, because I don't build decks. That's not really what I do. But that is basically going to do it for this weekend, for this week, rather, of Tournament Tactician, week number 52, 1 year, whoop-de-doo, just another day in the office. But thank you so much for watching. You know, do appreciate the continued support from this community. It's been awesome. I can't wait to keep casting tournaments for you guys. So this is what we're looking at. The tier list, of course, going to be in the description below, as well as my Twitter, casterboulevard, where you can figure out when and where I'm casting each and every weekend. As I said, this weekend I will be on the broadcast for the Mastering Runeterra tournament. I believe I will be casting with the Blevins, who I've been on the mic with more than a few times now. Really love the guy, so that'll be a good time. Come out and watch it. Not sure which channel it'll be on, which is why you should follow me on Twitter, at casterboulevard, and I will tell you when and where we're going live. So, in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and let me tell you my lineup. If I were playing this weekend, see, I'm a little lost. That's where I get a little lost. These are not the things that I usually think about too hard. Generally, when I'm throwing out what I would play this weekend, it's just to like give you a sense of the kind of player I am, you know, maybe give you some direction. I would definitely bring Mage and Cythera. This is a deck that I'm very interested in. I would probably, once again, bring my patented Draven Swain. I'm not a big fan of the Ezreal, but I do really like Swain in the deck, so that's another deck that I've been playing a lot on ladder. And then, as far as my third deck, that's where things start to get interesting. As much as I like TLC, and I've been a big proponent of it, as I had mentioned earlier, it would be an experimental build with a lot more ramp in it. And you know what? Yeah, maybe that's what I bring. Because when I was playing ladder, I was just seeing, I think I played 15 games, and I literally only played against Draven Ezreal and Ace Demacia, which feels like there's certainly a Shadow Isle control build out there that is going to counter that kind of meta, but it is going to take a little bit more of a hyper focus on those kinds of matchups, and I think that's how you need to be building TLC right now. You can't just go for broad strokes. The meta is much more centralized. A lot of the decks are playing the same way, and TLC can be the best deck in the game again. You just have to focus your build on the matchups that you're going to be seeing, and in tournament that is so much easier. So I would run some kind of weird experimental TLC build with more ramp, probably not Weirding Stone, but I might even get a little bit saucy and throw in something like Voices of the Old One. None of the units can't, you know, have Screeching Dragon picking apart my ramp strategy. I need spells that ramp me. Probably wouldn't play, yeah, you know, I mean, there's enough 5-mana ramp spells out there. We've got the Catalyst of Aeons, and we've also got the +0/+2 to a unit, which does not require you to have a unit on field that will also ramp. Maybe you just throw like 5 of those in a deck. Throw in a little bit more extra draw power. I don't know. That's something that I would definitely workshop were I playing in a tournament this weekend, but I am not. So yeah, it'd have to be some kind of wonky, rampy TLC build, Draven Swain, and Matron Cythera. So thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard, and as always, good luck in your tournaments.